Welcome. Thank you for joining me for the 5th episode of Women of Color and Confidence. I am your host, Amber Rose West. Today, I'm going to be talking about being Black and biracial. I have grown up in my life walking this line, kind of sitting on two sides of a fence. And I began to realize as I was growing up very early on that there were two sides of this fence. I really got to thinking more about this back when I lived in San Diego, and it was around the time, I believe, of the second Women's March. And there was talk all around San Diego about how a lot of the Black women and women of color there didn't feel like they were represented at the Women's March, and that in fact the Women's March was actually a white women's march. And I did know a couple of people who had organized the march, and they were white, but they were also, as facilitators, really disliking the fact that their event was lacking inclusion. And they went about asking Black women and women of color, what are we doing wrong? And why don't Black women want to come? And the Black people that I knew in San Diego, they really had no patience for, white people asking these questions. And they always felt like it wasn't a part of a Black woman's job to teach other people about why they don't feel safe in spaces, or to tell you or show you how you can properly represent Black and brown women in a movement that you're trying to have. It had me thinking a lot about how much I grew up white and in white spaces. By that age, there were things that I knew and there were things that I didn't know. And I was also out there to get more education, right? But I believe that the white people, at least the white people that I knew, were asking because they cared about knowing. What I already knew, I wanted to share with white people as some sort of knowledge or education so that they had a better understanding. But then I was also worried that once they got it, didn't mean that they'd actually put that information into play, or would they get offended? And Black friends would often say, it's not my job to teach the oppressor why we are oppressed, and subsequently be in the line of backlash or aggression. And I felt that for sure. I understood. I was an adult by that point, and there was a long road of understanding and growth behind me that got me to that point of understanding what was on both sides. So my biological father is Black and my mother is white. And my bio dad was in and mostly out of the house until I was about 4 when he left for good. So I was raised by my white mother and my white family, and I was considered whitewashed. My bio dad was raised in Chicago, so most of my family on his side lived there, and I didn't spend any time with them growing up. I spent a lot of time as a kid having adults tell me, oh, well, you're not that Black, or you talk really well for a Black kid. And they were mainly complimenting me on how Black I wasn't. This can be really damaging to Black and white biracial children. It forces us to look at both of our races as one side is good and one side is bad. The white side was good, and so the more white I was, the more good I was. The Black side was the bad side, so I tried really hard not to be on the Black side. And I really embraced my white side. But this can also be really offensive to Black children, because there are intelligent and well-spoken Black children. So when you say not that Black, you're supposing that being Black is something you should not want to be. And although I wasn't really put in a place to think about it in this way when I was a kid, I now know that while people were saying it was good for not being so Black, Black kids were likely being told they aren't good enough just because they were Black. So today I'm not going to speak on any other woman, any other Black and biracial woman's experience, but I do want to share with you how these comments in my childhood really messed up my ability to create confidence growing up. So I was told that Black was not something to be admired or wanted. So I struggled with belonging my entire life. I still struggle emotionally and mentally with belonging as an adult. I knew that I was different from my white family when I was a kid, just based on the tones of our skins, but nothing else really. So when I learned that Black was bad, I went full on white passing. And white passing is when people of color or Black people who have mixed features or light skinned are enough to pass as a white person. And you do get treated differently when you white pass. And I dove into that head first. Through the comments that constantly came at me, I was taught that Black people equal dumb, lazy, dirty. Dirty usually had to do with our hair. And so I switched into white mode a lot. And my personal white mode was trying to be as smart as I could. I never liked to miss school, and I never turned in a homework assignment late, because those two things were associated with being dumb and being lazy. And I went into wearing my hair up all the time so that people wouldn't make fun of it or judge me for it. In 6th grade, I actually went as far as to shave my head, because I figured if people couldn't see it and they couldn't make fun of it, then I wouldn't be bullied for having the hair that I have. So I was really outcast and I was really bullied because I didn't fit into either one of my races 100%. For my white peers, I was too Black, and for my Black peers, I was too white. And don't get me wrong, I did have friends, and most of those friends came from hobby groups or sports. But when it came to my peer groups, at least racially speaking, they usually judged me for the same things, but they judged those same things for different reasons. The biggest ones being, of course, my hair. So hair is a big thing. It's been a big thing for me my entire life. It's a big thing for a lot of Black women. And when I was a kid, it was too curly and unruly for white kids, and Black kids would tease me because I let it grow naturally. I remember in high school, there was a bunch of Black juniors. They were all women, and we were walking in a group down our open hallways, and they spit at me, and they told me that I needed to get my nappy hair pressed because I was embarrassing them as Black people. I played water polo, and I was raised by the ocean. I am such a water baby at heart. The Black girls at my school used to make fun of me for playing a white sport, and they always used to tell me that if I wanted to really be Black, then I needed to run track and field. I was the only Black girl on my team for many years, and while my personal teammates were very cool to me, I was harassed by other teams and other schools in the locker room. They would always say things like, we better make sure there's another lifeguard on duty because we all know Black people can't swim. Or I had one school that came into the locker room while I was changing, throwing life vests at me, saying, Black kids can't swim. So it was really tough to, be the only Black person and have to share that experience with nobody but myself. And then lastly, on holidays, my mother's side of the family is Jewish. And I was raised with those holidays, but I never really felt like I understood a lot of the Jewish holidays. And I definitely didn't understand a lot of my Black holidays because I didn't have Black family to celebrate them with. So I turned to school in the hopes that some of our groups or peer groups our cultural groups would help educate me a little bit when I was in high school. So I wanted to join the Jewish club at school. And when I went for the first meeting, nobody talked to me, nobody acknowledged me. And I finally, on my way out, asked a girl, why didn't anybody say anything to me? And she said, none of us have ever seen a Black Jew before. And so we all just kind of thought you were lying about being Jewish. At that same school, we had a Black Alliance that was helping to curate a Kwanzaa celebration to share with the school, to educate them on what Kwanzaa is and how it's celebrated. And when I went to the meeting to help be a part of the planning, there was a Black woman in the group who said I wasn't Black enough to help celebrate or help curate. So, these experiences made me realize two things here. The first is that because I never fully chose a side when it came to my race, there wasn't a place for me in the world. And even if I did make a choice, that whichever side it was that I chose, there would always be people on that side to say that I didn't belong there because I wasn't 100% that race. Our kids, and the second one is that our kids haven't been shown that being biracial is an option because I'm not one or the other. I am a combination of both. Living in this duality came with a lot of torment growing up. There was pain and hurt inflicted from the outside that then was quite internalized. It definitely crushed my confidence and my spirit more than once. I suffered a massive identity crisis in my early 20s that almost buried me completely. So after all this childhood trauma that I had to figure out on my own, I was then tossed into the world as an adult, and it was really hard for me to reconcile my place in society as a biracial woman. I always felt like the world was forcing me to choose my placement. And I realized as I got older that the world outside of school had already chosen my identity for me based on the way that I looked. And while the world does groom Black people for their placement, you know, don't scare white people, expect people to follow you around in the stores, the police pull you over for no reason, every white man that you don't agree with is gonna call you a hoe. These are things that they teach us when we're growing up, but that grooming didn't really hit me until I started college. If you were to ask me when I was a kid how I personally identified, I would have told you I identify as a white person. And why? Well, I was raised by white people. My mother, my uncles, my aunts, my cousins, my grandparents, my teachers, my Girl Scout troop, most of my school, my water polo team, all of them are white. So I was surrounded by, nurtured by, schooled by, raised by white people. My Black dad was the person who was meant to teach me about being Black, and he was absent. You learn what you're taught, and if no one is there to teach you that, then you don't learn it. I didn't learn about being Black growing up because there was no one there present in my life to give me that education. However, when you're Black in America, you get a second education, and that education comes from society. So if you ask me now how I identify, I say I am Black and biracial. I honor that I'm biracial because I am. But I am definitely Black, and I do identify as Black because I got my education in my Black identity every day that I stepped outside of my house. Because no matter how much a Black or biracial woman identifies as white or as mixed race, the world is going to identify her as Black and treat her that way. They see my skin color, they see my nose, they see my big curly hair. For me, they see my gap. So just being looked at by a stranger, I've been called ghetto, even though I've never lived in one. Nappy, because my hair is big and it's natural. Stupid, even though I have 2 college degrees. A hoe, even though I've never slept with them and they don't know who I've slept with. And every single racial slur that you can imagine just because. When you're Black in America, you don't get to forget for 1 second that you are Black. And even if you're half white or raised by white people, identifying as a white woman, you will never be seen as that because you are Black. It's a forced identity that comes with aggression. Aggression I didn't experience being around white friends or family. And part of me thinks that it's probably because I blended in being raised by them. But when I wasn't with older white people, I was treated very differently. And I vividly remember when I was a kid being viewed as a Black woman instead of a Black kid, somehow more grown than my white girlfriends who were the same age as me. And I honestly do think, and it goes back to this, and I've spoken about it before, that is because we have been fetishized and sexualized, and they try to control us by controlling the narrative that goes around our bodies. And for some reason, we're expected to be further along in life in knowing what's right and what's wrong. Like making mistakes in my 20s, I was grown enough to know, but my white friends making those same mistakes got off with a warning and a call to their parents. So they force us to grow up, therefore we have to learn how to protect ourselves, and we do end up having that attitude of, I got this. They force us into stereotypes so that they can control us rather than allowing us to naturally bloom. It really is a heartbreaking thing to experience. And I experienced it firsthand being among white friends and seeing how the world automatically treated us differently everywhere that we'd go. So this is how I've grown on both sides of the fence. I know what it's like to be white passing and know nothing of racism or exclusion or bias. And I know what it's like to be Black and experience fear and oppression and stereotypes. I used to be afraid to say, I'm Black in public because there was always that one person I knew who from the other side of somewhere in the room would say, yeah, but you're white too. As if being biracial completely negated the fact that I was Black. I am Black, I am biracial, and I will never be able to be just white. I have an understanding of identities that white people can never have and Black people can't fully experience. And all those differences are okay. Being biracial is okay. We run into issues when we force people to choose how they want to represent themselves at the threat of taking away inclusion and love and support. Many Black and biracial women are breaking these stereotypes, and I freaking love watching it, and I love being a part of it. We have more biracial people in this country than before, and I'm praying that that means that our children are being taught more inclusion of mixed races, mixed identities, mixed cultures, and mixed religions. Because growing up without any of that means that the confidence of biracial people suffer. Black women and women of color, especially in the United States, suffer from judgment for not being the ideal picture of beauty that the Americas have created. There is a picture that has been painted of us, that was painted of us as the media was growing, right? This idea of welfare queens and crack hoes and single moms, et cetera, et cetera. And those are the stereotypes that we have to overcome, because even if we don't fit into any of those stereotypes, it's still imagery that follows us and it haunts us. And we are now coming out and away from that imagery. So as you've seen on this show, and you will continue to see in the weeks coming, Black women are so much more than this typecast imagery that you've come to think of us as. We are highly educated. We are business owners. We are making money. We're community collaborators. We're family loving, healers, artists, social workers. We're caring, we're determined, and we create things that are magical for everybody to experience. So me personally, having grown up in this Black and biracial identity for myself, confidence was a huge thing that I felt like I never had a place to turn to learn any of it. That's why I chose to focus on the field of confidence for women especially. This idea of being able to create confidence and maintenance our own confidence and our own happiness, because it was such a struggle in my life. As a grown woman, I see now so much of my life was affected by my inability to experience confidence, but also being unable to create it for myself. And now I see myself as a Black and biracial woman who is worthy of confidence. And creating this confidence has been a journey, a very long, long journey. And just like happiness, being confident is a journey, it's not a destination. And that's something that I continue to work on. I realized that my purpose in life is to help other women learn how to think and create their own self-confidence, confidence that is authentic to who they are, genuine to making them feel good, and making sure they know that they have a place in this world. And I created this show to help other women express and experience Black confidence, and it echoes through the work that I do. I do teach classes on how to reprogram your confidence so that it actually feels like your own self-esteem. It's so important to remove the blocks that you have inside of you so that creating confidence isn't based on external approval or external validation. So this week I have launched this workbook that I have been working on for months and months and months, and it's called the 7-Step Confidence. And I want to share it because it's a process of creating confidence that starts inside, that allows you to express your confidence outside, which is literally everything that I had to learn how to do, and very largely based on the fact that I had these struggles with being Black and being biracial. So I wanted to share it here on the show with all of y'all because it really is a guidebook. It walks you through. And it is important to me that people understand that confidence isn't something that you get from your parents or your teachers or your boyfriends or your pets or your neighbors or anybody. It's something that you create inside of you. And it's as the more that you create it and the more that you're able to understand who you are and what genuinely makes you feel good and feel confident, then the more you express that out into the world. So I'm going to put a link in the comments to those of you who are watching on video. If you are podcast listening, I will drop it in the link to this guidebook in the description. You can also visit theconfidencecolumn.com and you'll find 7-Step Confidence under the freebie tab. And I want to reiterate how much this is about creating confidence that radiates your personal authenticity. So you can start expressing yourself confidently in a way that feels good to you, because ultimately that is what confidence is all about. And whether you are single race, mixed race, biracial, Black, I want you to know that like your confidence doesn't come from any of that. It genuinely comes from who you are, your heart and your soul. And it's about time we see more of that from more of you. So I hope that you'll download it. It's 100% free. And if you do the guidebook, I would love to hear your feedback on how it made you feel, what you were able to understand better about yourselves, and the confidence that you have been able to create. So I just want to say thank you to everybody who has joined us live today. And I hope that you'll join me next week for episode 6 of Women of Color and Confidence, where I will sit down with Crystal Crowell. Crystal is a clinical social worker and just this year was crowned a beauty pageant queen. We are going to be discussing how Black women maintain a positive self-image while navigating themselves in white-dominated spaces. So it's going to be a great conversation. I hope that you'll join us next Wednesday, October 14th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Pacific, and I'll see you then.